Sun, moon, stars, sky, earth, ocean. Long ago, the humans... Huh?
Clone 34.
What?
Yeah, we did that last year.
Roll the second clip. Aspero! Everyone knows that rule number one of being a YouTuber is to always be topical. That's why today we're going to be reviewing a series that came out 2 months ago that everyone has already talked about. Number one, does it address the problems of the first season? And number two, how does the second season stand by itself? And I'm going to keep you on edge by doing a sponsorship #marketing strategies. Remember kids, when online, use protection with ExpressVPN, who make sure that our
glorious corporate overlords
don't steal all of your stuff. Go to expressvpn.com/HFM to try it out for yourself. Link down below. And because I have to say this, spoilers, obviously. If you just wanted a quick summary of what I thought of the second season, then how long have you been following this channel? But I have 4 major pieces of praise, 2 minor criticisms, and 1 major criticism. Number 1, Avarice was a much needed and great addition to the story. Number 2, the world building and magic system was a lot more in depth in this season than in the first. Number 3, it had a far clearer, far more interesting, far more cohesive climax to this season that felt like it was the end of what should have been the first season, with the culmination of various character arcs and conclusions of various points of dramatic tension. Number 4, the animation and the frame rate, which it was criticized for quite heavily, was vastly improved in this season. It was a lot easier to watch, and it was just generally more visually stunning. We'll get more on that later. And my criticisms were that 5, Callum's eventual revelation and gaining magic was a lot less compelling than it could have been. 6, the exploration of dark magic was underwhelming, and my major criticism of the second season is Sauron. We'll get to him later. There was something else. Oh yeah, Avarice is my sexuality. In an earlier video, I said that there were 5 things that I wanted from Season 2. Conflict between Callum, Rayla and Ezran, and Sauron and Claudia, deeper world building, Rayla's backstory, a deeper look into the mirror, and smoother animation. I am pretty happy to say that we got most of this, and the things that we didn't, I can see why. Let's start with Avarice and the mirror. The absolute highlight of the season was Avarice, voiced by Eric Dullums, otherwise known as Ko the Face Stealer.
It's been a long time.
They built him up perfectly across the season as this mysterious and ancient force. We get this distinctive feeling that no matter how close he gets, Varen is entirely out of his depth, that what he's dealing with is bigger and darker and more powerful than he could ever imagine, than any of us imagine. And that sort of looking into the dark depths of the ocean was really effective. His scenes, his music, his expressions were just haunting.
Speak.
One thing that I kind of felt was missing from the first season was a sense of mystery, that there was a wider story at play that we didn't yet fully understand. And Avarice entirely addresses that problem. Having his name vanish from the history books, having Avarice not know where he is, having the key of Avarice unlock something in Xadia, it just throws up so many questions that are interesting, that keep me asking and wanting to know and watching. In the first season, it kind of felt a little bit like everything that we saw on the screen was all there was to know. And now, there's so much more out there, and I don't know what's out there, and I love that feeling. Richmond and Ahaz, the creators of the show, also quite effectively established him as a villain, and how they did that was they took Varen, the character who we have seen as the most proficient with magic, one of the most conniving and cunning and powerful characters we have on the show, and he's entirely out of his depth. Avarice is clearly playing him. He's clearly one step ahead of him at every point, and he's ahead of every other character in the story as well. With the final scene being, you know, I will stay with you, and we get this deep sense that he planned all of this. And that's great. that's really interesting. That contrast of showing Avarice to be so much more intelligent and powerful than the powerful characters we've met before was really effective. And on a more personal note, the choice to cast Eric Dollums as Avarice was just phenomenal. I remember when I listened to him in the opening credits of the first season.
Long ago, Zadia was one land.
And I was like, no, they didn't cast Ko. And I looked it up and it was true, and I was overwhelmed, I was stoked. And I didn't even actually think, I was like, I guess they're just using him as a one-off again, because that's all they did in Avatar. I really wanted Ko to come back with that voice actor, and he never did, and I was gutted. And maybe this is satiating my deeply rooted desire to get me more face stealing. I just need more monkeys
without faces.
But what about the second point? What about the deeper and more complex world building? One of the problems that I felt the first season had was that the towns and places they went to didn't really feel like places. They felt kind of empty. They didn't really have much of a distinctive character. The town they went to in the climactic episode, and the town with the sun knife, it just kind of felt bland. This was a lot better in Season 2. Part of this, I think, is the increase in budget. It just allows them to do more in every kind of aspect of the show. But the biggest reason was that they actually took time to really give us a sense of place with amazing shots like this. And they also spent like 3 whole episodes just in Lujan's hideout. We see all of the rooms and hallways and ruins and the moon pool. We get a far stronger sense of place than we necessarily did with just the one-off towns that they visited in one episode. It felt a lot more like the 3 episodes that we spent at the Castle of Catullus in the first season, the opening 3 episodes, which did feel like a real place, because they actually took the time to establish it and show us what it's like. The middle third of the season is taken up by flashbacks, which don't actually world build any specific place so much, but they sort of give us a sense of a wider world that's more connected, that there is a world outside of the journey of Callum, Rayla, and Ezrin, and I quite liked that. And the last third of the season takes place in this fortress near the border, and there are really interesting shots, like we can see them up in the mountains next to the fortress, and we can see the lava border in the background. That ability to know kind of where something is in relation to the rest of the world, which we've seen in the giant map, is really cool. So we think about in Avatar when they're looking in the distance and they can see the walls of Passing Say even though they're so far away. That sort of thing is really, really impressive. And part of the world building is the magic system, which I want to talk about because so much of the second season revolves around the magic system. Stories like Brandon Sanderson's works and Avatar are so clearly built around their magic systems. Specifically dark magic, because in the first season we didn't really know how dark magic worked. Like, we knew that it required magical animals, but there wasn't really much definition beyond that. They had to have some sort of spell components, but it could kind of do whatever the characters needed at whatever the point in the story. The second season gave a clarity that I really felt it needed. The best scene to demonstrate this is when Claudia has a tentacle, clearly a magical octopus tentacle, and she crushes it, and she creates a giant spectral octopus tentacle to yank people out of the sky. It seems to be that the dark magic takes on the abilities of the magical creature. Another example of this is when she uses a griffin eye, a bird's eye, which are known for being very precise and being able to see at a far distance and being able to pinpoint prey and not miss. She uses that to enchant a bolt to hit its target. There is a logical connection there, and I actually really like this setup. I think it's quite creative. I feel like there's a lot that they could do with this, but they need to be careful because it sort of just seems that Claudia, who is a protagonist pretty much, seems to have whatever she needs for most spells. We haven't really had a point at which she doesn't have whatever she needs. really? Like, there hasn't been a point where there's been a devastating and disastrous consequence because she doesn't have the right spell components. What I would really like to see is her to have to kind of really think about what she's collecting and where she's getting it from. Maybe she goes, hey, I want to take this thing from this magical creature, and then Rayla and Callum have to stop her because they don't want to kill the magical creature, and she says, yeah, but this is gonna save a town, you know. These sort of things could be a lot more interesting, and we haven't seen that yet, but who knows where we could go with this in the future. They just have to be careful of Claudia's magic not turning into the 11th Doctor's sonic screwdriver or Hermione's pocket of everything, where they can just pull anything out of the air that they need. But they also further defined primal magic by introducing the thing called the Arcanum, which is sort of having an understanding of the sky magic or ocean magic or earth magic on a deep and personal and philosophical level. Elves seem to naturally have this. This is why they can naturally use magic. Humans don't. And I really like this. It kind of plays into why elves sort of see themselves as better, and it also kind of feeds into that idea of why they just dismiss dark magic, because they don't understand the need to do magic, because they can just do it by themselves. This did make the magic system feel more like its own instead of just bending with a few extra steps, because there's now kind of this character dimension that can be really interesting and fun to play with, especially given different understandings of what sky magic or ocean magic really are could manifest in different kinds of magic, despite being all sky magic. I really like that. That's really cool. And this leads me on to one of my minor criticisms of the second season: how the magic system was used in Callum's character arc. So, Callum's character arc throughout the second season is essentially him being left feeling useless. After he destroyed the Primal Stone, he doesn't have any magic anymore, and he wants to learn magic, and there's this really nice moment of him saying, I thought magic was my thing. You know, because he's got Rayla, who's an athletic, sword-fighting elf with magical powers, and Ezrin is his younger stepbrother who can talk to animals, and he's the king, and Callum's just this prince. He can't do that sort of stuff. I think that was a really human moment, and I can definitely relate to that. A lot of people definitely could. Because of this, he struggles with the temptation of dark magic, an easy way for him to do magic as a human. And the climax of the series ends with him discovering his Arcanum of sky magic. Aspero! Being the first human to use primal magic, presumably ever, as far as we're aware. To be clear, I don't have a problem with this conceptually. The idea of Callum discovering his own Arcanum, given how related to character and personal philosophy it is actually a really good one. But I have two issues. Firstly, his realization of what sky magic means to him on that personal and philosophical level just kind of comes out of nowhere for his character. His revelation is to just breathe when he's under stress, when things get too much. But there doesn't seem to be any build up to this realization. I'm not sure of the intrinsic connection between his revelation to just breathe and the character struggles that we have seen in him beforehand. We actually saw, as he came to this realization, that he suffered from a panic attack when he was younger, with his mum telling him to just breathe. And the prospect of using his relationship with his mother and panic attacks to bring him to that realization is a good one. But we don't see that before this. It may have been more meaningful to have Callum struggle with panic attacks or anxiety attacks, and to draw on that connection with his mother, whom he loves, to come to this realization, but to build this up beforehand by having him suffer panic attacks repeatedly, that we would have needed to see this more than just the one time, the couple of minutes before he realizes don't breathe. To have at least had a moment in the past and a point of tension where people are depending on him and he has a panic attack and that cripples him. That would have made the revelation of Just Breathe, with that connection to his mum and panic attacks, a lot more meaningful. But I may have missed something. I may just be misinterpreting it. Let me know down in the comments below. And this also meant that his inability to do magic, which was one of the more interesting parts of his character at this point, was kind of just solved pretty quickly. Yeah, the second criticism I have of Callum's character arc and the magic system is the exploration of dark magic was kind of underwhelming. I was really excited because I wanted to engage with the moral ambiguity of using dark magic, and given that it is seemingly one of the main reasons that humans were cast out originally and the continent was divided, to just blanket say, yes, it's immoral, is to sort of legitimize the elves' position when they cast the humans out, and to be like, yeah, they were right, that's totally fair. Which to me sort of cheapens the conflict, though I will caveat this by saying that I'm pretty sure we don't know the full history of how and why the humans were cast out, particularly to do with this guy and my sexuality. Now, to their credit, Ahaz and Richmond do engage with this question to an extent. Callum does eventually decide, yes, I'm gonna use it, and he does it to save the dragon. Rayla turns on him because of that choice. Claudia tempts and encourages him, and he suffers the consequences. But, like every single school teacher that ever taught to my parents at any point in my education ever said, there was a lot of untapped potential.
Even though I know it's wrong.
But is it really so wrong?
Yes.
Is it, though?
Yes.
Is it?
Yes!
In particular, we see that you can use things like petals when doing dark magic. Just petals, flowers, plants. What if Callum's moral quandary was not a binary choice of do I use dark magic or not, but to what extent and how can I use dark magic ethically? That is a lot more an interesting question. For example, say he uses petals to heal a friend. Just dark magic, like that, which would seemingly be okay. It's just plants. But then he has to make the decision, do I kill a beetle to save a friend? Something that humans probably wouldn't think much of, but elves might think a lot more of. For a story that is supposedly based in questioning prejudices of things and people being inherently evil, like the elves think that humans are inherently evil, and also think dark magic is inherently evil, it would be a lot more an interesting conclusion to come to say dark magic is about how you use it and the extent to which you use it. That's what makes it immoral or moral. That may have been more thematically resonant, but then again, I don't know how Richmond and Ahaz are going to play this in future seasons. They have the foresight that I don't. So, you know, put a pin in that. There's a phrase here that I'm forgetting. put something in that, and then we'll talk about that in the future seasons when we've explored this more. But let's talk about one of the great things of season 2, its narrative cohesion. So when the first season ended, I was genuinely surprised. I was like, oh, that's the last episode. Guess I'll just wait for the second season. This season actually felt like a climax. To me, it felt like this season's climax was meant to be the climax of the first season, which is understandable. They only had 12 episodes of 20 minutes each. 24 episodes of 20 minutes each is a decently sized season. The border crossing brought it all together with the culmination of Ozymandias's and Ezran's relationship, with Ozymandias flying, as well as Callum's new magical abilities, making sure that they can cross into Xadia with Rayla's guidance. It was all very neat, tied together, and I really liked that. At the same time, there's this really cool fight with a dragon, with Claudia eventually having to choose between her mission, given by her father, and her brother. That was a good place to end their character arc for this season. I will say that no point in this season actually hit me emotionally, which sucks because I know that that's what they were going for, with Claudia begging Callum's forgiveness and Callum's moment of truth when he discovers magic. They just didn't resonate with me, but I don't want to label this as a criticism because I feel like it's just me. Let me know which point was the most emotional for you down below. The one point that probably got pretty close to that was seeing Sauron crippled on the ground. That part was done really beautifully, and I was shocked and quite shaken by that. But yeah, I don't want to label that as a criticism because that's a very subjective experience for me. The best story thread in the second season is hands down how they dealt with the boys learning of King Harrow's death. Massive praise to them for actually taking the time to explore grief in depth and with nuance. Callum went from wanting to tell Ezran to wanting to keep it from him to protect him, to feeling he has a responsibility to do so, to not wanting to read the letter from him because it's the last words he has, exploring the grief and sadness in an extended and heartfelt way. There's an emotional complexity there that we don't often see in shows like this. Having Claudia be the one to tell Callum was also a really nice narrative choice because it humanizes Claudia when she plays a somewhat antagonistic role, and it's an emotional moment for Rayla because Rayla has struggled with whether or not she should tell them for a long time, and when she eventually owns up to her past, Callum already knows. It's kind of like she failed, and that was one of the kind of deeper moments of the season. He feels betrayed by her, but the conflict doesn't feel forced and they don't dwell on it in a way that kind of trivializes it. I want to take a moment to talk about the flashbacks with Anika and Nahar as well. They were absolutely fantastic. I loved them. There's some of the most visually stunning moments in the series with the Magma Titan and the Dragon King and Sarai's death that was really hard to watch. Flashbacks tend to feel kind of out of place, like they stunt the action in the middle of the story. This one, I didn't feel that way. It didn't cut into a moment where there was so much story going on outside of that. Most of the story is kind of in the beginning third with Rayla and Claudia kind of playing off one another. And then in the last third with Callum and Dark Magic. That's kind of how it plays out. This is in the middle third, which was fine because they were just traveling. And it stood on its own, and it definitely gave us a broader context for what's going on outside the world of Rayla, Ezran, and Callum, which I like because it gives us this idea of a broader story unfolding. There was this idea of bigger forces, other kingdoms, more players in the game now, in the Game of Thrones, than we're introduced to at the start. It also gives further definition to that line from Harrow in the first season where he says, "I've done terrible things." It colours his character in a new light, and I really like that. And now for my major point of criticism. Saurons Paralysis. It was solved way too quickly. Kind of like Callum's magic, but worse, because when I saw Sauron was paralysed, I thought this was the best and bravest narrative move that they could have possibly made in the story so far. It had so much opportunity, and I thought, wow, this is gonna take a long time to explore the consequences and how their actions and Varen pushing his children to do these horrible things led to this terrible consequence, and it's gonna play into really interesting character dynamics between them all, but no. Claudia just casts a spell and it's all solved. George R. R. Martin, the author of A Game of Thrones, once talked about how he designs character arcs. And he talked about how he takes away the one thing that makes them who they are. Think Jaime and his hand, Arya Stark and her name, Ned Stark and his head. And he asks, who are they without it? It's a really effective and interesting way to deconstruct a character and make them build themselves up again. I thought that that was what they were going to do with Sauron. The one thing that he has defined himself by is his sword fighting ability, is his athleticism, is his body. And they even play with the idea in the episode itself with them saying, we're going to do poetry and I'm going to be an intellectual. And I thought him becoming paralyzed would be a really interesting way for him to explore who he is without these advantages. Because his physical prowess wasn't just the source of his skill, but also the source of his pride and arrogance. And also Claudia not being able to do anything, for dark magic not being able to help, would have been a really powerful emotional moment. So just undoing it like that, within the same episode, felt pretty weak to me. Now, it's possible that the writers are actually focusing more on the effects on Claudia of using dark magic. There are hints of that in the episode. When she uses that spell at the end to cure him, she gets a white streak in her hair and her eyes are dark, and they kind of focus on the reaction for her. So it's possible we're going to see something like a cancer growing. And I don't mean like literally a cancer, but like imagine dark magic is bad for you in the long run. And using it too much in this kind of way is going to be bad for her. That could be interesting. That could be where they're going with this. And if they did go down that road, I wouldn't be too unhappy, because that would be something interesting to explore. But they could have done that either way without taking such an important moment for Sauron and just trivializing it like that, cheapening Sauron's development. It might have been fine if either A, it took a long time to find the spells to actually heal him, or B, it didn't heal him entirely. Maybe he was reduced to a wheelchair, but he got his arms back. That might have been okay, actually. But what did you think of that moment? Let me know down below. But of course, we cannot forget that amazing moment in The Dragon Prince. ExpressVPN! Hey, so you know how The Dragon Prince is on Netflix? Well, sometimes Netflix just decides to be cruel and put some shows on in some countries and not on in other countries. Isn't it, Netflix? They just hate New Zealanders, apparently. And the way to get around that is with ExpressVPN, which is why I use it. And for under $7 a month, with a 30-day money-back guarantee, you can take back your internet privacy today. And by clicking the link down below, #that's important, you can get 3 months free as well. That's expressvpn.com/HFM. You can be anyone you want. You can be from Canada, from Scotland, from America, from Australia. All up to you. So do I recommend watching The Dragon Prince Season 2? Absolutely, it is a massive step up from the first season, and I really look forward to what Richmond and Haas have packed for our next 5 seasons. As always, come follow me on social media, especially my Twitter and my Instagram. Yes, I have an Instagram. I've caved to the millennial masses. And thank you, by the way, to those of you who already have. It's really been fun live streaming there. If you want to kind of get some background info and whatever, I tend to post there. I tend to try to be as interactive as I can be. Also, you get pictures of Mishi, which is the only thing you should ever care about in the world. If you don't, then what are you doing with your life? Because look how cute his paw is! Ah! Stay nerdy, and I'll see you in the future.